In the deep heart of the galaxy, far away from Earth, a great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with voices and laughter. It was a place where the oldest and strongest alien civilizations gathered. They came to speak about war, peace, and power. That day, the council was not serious. That day, it was full of jokes, because the subject was Earth. The aliens called humans a young species. They said Earth was small, weak, and unready for the dangers of the stars. Some laughed so loudly that their voices echoed in the chamber. A tall creature with silver scales raised his long arm and spoke. He said humans had armies that looked like toys. He said even a training drone of his people was stronger than a whole squad of human soldiers. The crowd of aliens laughed harder. Another alien with 4 glowing eyes said humans lived too short a life to ever master war. He said their bones were fragile, their minds too emotional, their technology like old tools. More laughter followed. The words were cruel, but no one in the council tried to stop them. To the galaxy, Earth was not a threat. Earth was entertainment. But somewhere in the shadows of the council, a human diplomat sat in silence. He did not laugh. He did not speak. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold. He listened to every insult and every joke. Deep inside, he knew that the galaxy had made a mistake. Humans had been underestimated many times before in history. Every time, the result was the same. Humans adapted. Humans survived. And when humans decided to fight, they fought until the end. Back on Earth, the people had already heard the whispers of the galaxy. They knew they were seen as weak. They knew others thought of them as prey, not rivals. But Earth had been through this before. Many empires in human history had laughed at weaker nations. Many had believed victory was easy. And many had fallen when the human spirit rose against them. Hidden under mountains and deep under oceans, Earth's military was not sleeping. Secret bases worked day and night. Soldiers trained in silence, not for show, but for survival. They were not preparing to fight like aliens. They were preparing to fight like humans. They studied the enemy, studied their machines, studied their patterns. They learned every strength and every weakness. The leaders of Earth met in secret halls. They did not dream of building bigger ships than the aliens. They did not try to match their power in size. They knew they could never win by copying the galaxy. So they searched for another way. Humans had always found victory through creativity. They had always used strange tactics, sudden tricks, and desperate courage. In history, small armies had defeated larger ones by thinking differently. The same would happen again, only this time on a galactic scale. In the silence of training grounds, human soldiers pushed their bodies beyond limits. They ran in deserts, climbed frozen mountains, and swam through black oceans. They trained to fight without food, without light, and without hope. They learned to move as shadows, to strike as lightning, and to disappear before the enemy understood what happened. They learned to fight not only with weapons but with mind, patience, and will. Engineers built machines not for beauty but for survival. Small ships that could vanish from scanners. Weapons that looked simple but could strike with deadly effect. Drones that could move like swarms of insects and confuse alien sensors. Earth was not preparing for a fair fight. Earth was preparing for a clever fight. Far away, the galaxy did not notice. They laughed louder each day. The great races told stories of weak humans to their children. They said humans were no more dangerous than animals. They showed images of Earth's old war machines and called them antiques. The laughter spread, and the insult grew. But in the quiet heart of Earth, there was no laughter. There was only focus. Every insult became fuel. Every joke became fire. Humanity had been given a gift, though the galaxy did not know it. The gift was underestimation. And from that gift, humans would build something the galaxy had never seen before. In the last meeting of the Council before war, one alien commander stood tall and spoke. He said if humans ever tried to resist the galaxy, the war would not last even a day. His words made the chamber roar with laughter once more. The sound of 1,000 voices rose into the stars, mocking the small blue planet called Earth. But far away, under the quiet sky of their home, humans were ready. The laughter of the universe reached their ears. And in silence, they prepared to answer. The answer would not come with words. It would come with fire, with steel, and with the unbroken will of mankind. The universe laughed at Earth's military. But soon, the universe would regret it. The first insults had already been spoken, and the laughter of the galaxy still echoed. But far away, on the blue world called Earth, the sound of laughter was replaced by the sound of drills, engines, and determination. The world's leaders had come together in secret, and for once in history, every flag was lowered to one. Humanity understood that they could no longer think as many nations. They had to think as one species. In an underground chamber beneath the Atlantic Ocean, the highest generals and scientists of Earth gathered. They spoke quietly, but their words carried heavy weight. They did not argue over politics or borders. They spoke only of survival. They knew the alien empires had ships the size of cities. They knew their weapons could burn a continent in hours. Against such power, Earth's armies were small and fragile. But the generals did not look afraid. They looked focused. One old general placed his hand on the table and said, "We will never win by fighting like them. We can only win by fighting like us." Those words became the heart of the plan. The Council of Earth's leaders studied the long history of humanity. They remembered how, long ago, warriors on foot had faced enemies with stronger weapons and larger numbers. They remembered how small armies had used the land, the weather, and the mind to defeat stronger foes. They remembered how humans had survived ice ages, plagues, and endless wars. Survival was not new to mankind. It was written in their blood. And so, Earth's strategy was born. The plan was not about building bigger ships. It was not about making cannons larger or armor heavier. The plan was about the one gift humans carried: creativity. In the cold mountains of Siberia, soldiers trained in secret. They learned to fight without machines, to move unseen in the snow, and to strike before vanishing. In the burning deserts, others trained in heat so fierce that no alien would dare step there. They learned to hide under the sand, to survive with little water, and to fight in silence. Deep beneath the seas, divers trained with new suits that let them move like shadows. Every environment on Earth became a classroom, and every hardship became training. The aliens laughed at Earth's weakness. They never understood that what they called weakness was training for survival. Engineers worked without rest. They did not try to copy alien technology, because they knew they could not. Instead, they created something different. Small ships, light and fast, able to hide inside asteroid fields. Drones the size of birds, carrying weapons that could cut through metal. Electronic systems that could fool alien sensors with false images. Traps hidden in space, waiting to be triggered at the right moment. Nothing was designed for open glory. Everything was designed for tricks, for confusion, for chaos. The galaxy believed war was simple. Two sides would meet, and the stronger would crush the weaker. But humans were preparing to show that war was not strength alone. War was patience. War was strategy. War was the mind. In one hidden base under the Rocky Mountains, soldiers sat in dark rooms staring at strange screens. They were not pilots or gunners. They were gamers, strategists, thinkers. They trained with simulations that copied alien movements and weapons. Every move was studied. Every weakness was mapped. They fought in games 1,000 times before they would fight in reality. And each time, they became faster, sharper, harder to predict. Word of these preparations never reached the galaxy. The alien empires did not spy on Earth because they saw no reason to. To them, humans were not worth the effort. Their arrogance blinded them, and that blindness became Earth's shield. Yet, even as humanity trained, they felt the shadow of fear. Reports came of alien fleets moving closer. Rumors whispered of experiments done on smaller species who had once resisted. The aliens had burned worlds before. They had erased whole cultures from history. Humanity knew what could happen if they lost. There would be no second chance. In the silence of a training field, a young soldier looked at the stars. He thought of his family, his city, his planet. He tightened his grip on his weapon, and in his eyes there was no fear, only fire. All across Earth, millions shared that same fire. Humanity was afraid, yes, but behind fear came resolve. The first human fleet was almost ready. It was not large, not grand, but it was fast and sharp like a blade in the dark. The generals called it the Phantom Fleet. It would not face the aliens head-on. It would strike from the shadows, disappear, and strike again. Like wolves hunting a giant, humans would never let the galaxy rest. The aliens thought humans were weak. They thought Earth was a joke. But they had forgotten something important. Laughter does not win wars. And the galaxy was about to learn that when humans fight, they fight with every drop of their soul. The preparations were complete. The weapons were ready. The soldiers stood waiting. Soon, the first clash between Earth and the galaxy would begin. And when it did, the sound of laughter in the council halls would fade. The day of the first battle came faster than anyone expected. A signal was sent across the stars. A small human fleet had been detected near the outer rim of the galaxy. The alien commanders laughed when they heard the news. They said humans were foolish to bring their weak ships so far from their little blue planet. They said this would not be a battle, it would be an execution. The alien council wanted to make an example. They wanted the whole galaxy to see how weak Earth truly was. So they gathered a massive armada. Hundreds of warships with armor thicker than mountains, weapons that could burn entire cities in one strike. These ships moved together like a storm, heading straight for the humans. The fight would be broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Billions of eyes would watch as humans were crushed. When the alien fleet arrived, they found only a small group of human ships. 20 in total, thin and simple compared to the giants that faced them. The alien commanders laughed again. The comparison was absurd. A child's toy army standing against gods of war. One alien captain opened the channel and spoke to the humans. His voice was filled with mockery. He told them to surrender, to accept their weakness, and perhaps they would be allowed to live as slaves. On the human side, no voice answered. The channel was silent. Then, without warning, the human ships moved. At first, the aliens thought it was a mistake. The small ships scattered, flying into different directions. They did not line up in formation like other fleets. They broke apart like shards of glass. Alien sensors struggled to track them. Their movements were too fast, too sharp. One moment they were in sight, the next they were gone. The alien commander ordered his ships to fire. Bright beams of energy cut across the void. Explosions lit the dark as a few human drones were destroyed. But then the real battle began. Out of the shadows of a nearby asteroid belt, hidden weapons activated. Mines disguised as rocks came alive, detonating with violent bursts. 2 alien warships were ripped apart before they even understood what had happened. The laughter in the command decks fell silent. The humans struck again, this time from behind. Their small ships were armed with weapons the aliens had never seen before. Not large cannons, but concentrated rail shots that pierced weak spots in alien armor. The first alien cruiser went dark, then the second. The massive fleet, so confident in its strength, suddenly felt confusion. Across the galaxy, billions watched in silence. They had expected a quick end. Instead, they saw chaos. The human ships did not fight like soldiers. They fought like predators. They struck from the dark, vanished, and struck again. Every move seemed planned, every trap carefully placed. Alien captains shouted orders, but their ships collided, their weapons hit empty space, their sensors showed ghosts. On one human ship, a captain gave calm instructions. He was not afraid. He told his crew to follow the plan, to remember their training. They moved with precision, like hunters surrounding prey. One alien commander screamed that the humans were cheating. This was not real war, he said. But his words ended when his ship exploded in a burst of fire. The galaxy watched in disbelief. Humans, the so-called weakest race, were tearing holes into the strongest fleet. The alien commanders had called the fight entertainment, but now their faces were pale. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now it was too late. After hours of battle, the space around the asteroid belt was filled with burning wrecks. The human fleet, though smaller, still stood. Some ships were damaged, some destroyed, but they had not been broken. Against all expectation, they had won. In the alien council chamber, silence replaced laughter. The leaders who had mocked Earth sat in shock. Reports came one after another. Human tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They used deception, patience, and unpredictability. They turned weakness into strength. On Earth, the news reached the people. When they heard of victory, they did not cheer loudly. They only grew more determined. They knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would not forgive the humiliation. The next battles would be harder, larger, deadlier. But in that moment, humanity had made history. For the first time, the galaxy stopped laughing. For the first time, they looked at humans not as prey, but as a threat. And for the first time, humans realized they had power. Not the power of size, not the power of numbers, but the power of mind, of will, of spirit. A power no empire could measure. The first battle was over. The war had only begun. The galaxy could not believe what it had seen. A single small fleet from Earth had faced an armada and survived. Not only survived, but won. The news traveled like fire through every system, from the richest empires to the smallest colonies. For the first time, the name human was spoken not with laughter, but with uneasy silence. Alien leaders tried to calm their people. They called it luck. They said it was impossible for such a young race to be dangerous. They promised that the next attack would crush Earth. But deep inside, even the proudest commanders felt a shadow of doubt. The humans had done something no one had ever done before. They had made the galaxy's strongest look weak. The response was fast. A second fleet was formed, larger than the first, filled with veterans who had fought in dozens of wars. They swore to wipe out the insult of defeat. The fleet moved toward Earth-controlled space, confident that this time there would be no surprises. But the humans were ready. In hidden bases spread across moons and asteroids, soldiers prepared ambushes. Small ships carried decoys that created false signals, confusing alien scanners. Drones swarmed in silence, ready to strike from multiple directions. Mines floated in empty space, disguised as harmless debris. The humans had studied the enemy again and again, and every detail was part of their plan. When the alien fleet entered the system, everything seemed calm. They scanned for enemy ships and found nothing. Then suddenly, their own ships began to vanish. A battleship exploded after colliding with a disguised mine. Another was struck by a swarm of drones that slipped through its defenses. Panic spread across the alien fleet. The human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. They never fought directly. They struck fast, then vanished into fields of dust and stone. Alien commanders shouted for order, but their fleets fell into chaos. They were trained to fight enemies who stood in lines and fired back with honor. They did not understand how to fight shadows, tricks, and traps. Across the galaxy, billions were watching again. They had gathered in great halls to see the humans destroyed. Instead, they watched in horror as the mighty alien fleet broke apart. Another defeat. Another humiliation. The laughter that once filled council chambers was gone. Now there were whispers. Some aliens began to fear that humans were not weak at all. Some asked if the galaxy had made a mistake by mocking them. Others argued that humans were dangerous and must be destroyed at all costs. But destroying them was no longer easy. In one secret human command center, generals studied the results of the second victory. They did not celebrate. They only spoke of what was to come. They knew the galaxy would not stop. They knew the enemy would return with more ships, more firepower, and more anger. Humanity had only two choices: fight harder or be erased. And they chose to fight. On Earth, training grew even more intense. Children grew up knowing the stars were dangerous. Young pilots learned to fly not in straight lines but in sudden curves and unpredictable movements. Soldiers trained to survive in environments that no alien dared to enter. Humanity prepared not just for battles, but for a long war. The aliens sent spies to watch Earth. But even spies could not explain what they saw. They reported humans working in strange ways, testing weapons that made no sense, building machines that seemed too small or too fragile. The spies laughed at these designs, but when they returned home, their empires no longer laughed. They remembered how those fragile ships had destroyed fleets. Fear grew in the hearts of the galaxy's greatest powers. They began to imagine a future where humans were not the prey, but the hunters. For the humans, every victory came with a price. Ships were lost, soldiers fell, and families mourned. But unlike many other species, humans did not break under loss. Every death only made their will stronger. They carried the memory of the fallen into the next battle. They fought not for glory, but for survival. And slowly, other species began to notice. Small civilizations, long oppressed by the great empires, watched the humans with hope. They saw a young race standing against impossible odds. They whispered among themselves, if humans can resist, maybe they can too. The war was no longer just about Earth. It was about the balance of power in the galaxy. The council met again. This time, there was no laughter, no jokes. Instead, there was anger and fear. The leaders argued for hours. Some wanted to send even larger fleets. Others wanted to form coalitions. But one thing was certain, humans could no longer be ignored. On Earth, the people waited. They knew the galaxy was preparing for something even greater. They knew the war would grow darker. But they were not afraid. They had already proven something to themselves and to the universe. The humans had been underestimated. And now, step by step, battle by battle, the galaxy was beginning to regret it. The next clash would not be small. It would decide whether humanity could truly stand against the combined might of the stars. And humanity was ready. The galaxy had changed. Once, the word human was a joke. Now, it was spoken in fear. The defeats of two mighty fleets could not be forgotten. Whole empires were humiliated. Proud commanders had lost their lives to what they once called a weak species. No one was laughing anymore. In the council halls, leaders shouted at each other. Some demanded humans be wiped out completely, no matter the cost. Others warned that sending more fleets would only lead to more shame. Yet none of them trusted humans anymore. They all agreed on one thing: Earth was dangerous. The galaxy prepared for total war. Coalitions were formed. Empires that once hated each other now joined hands, united by fear of mankind. Hundreds of ships gathered, larger than anything humanity had faced before. They were not just weapons of war, they were meant to be symbols. The galaxy wanted to prove that humans could not win forever. But the humans had already learned to expect this. On Earth, there was no time for celebration. Every victory had cost lives. Every battle had left scars. Soldiers were buried with honor, and their names became fuel for those still fighting. Families cried, but they did not beg for peace. They knew peace would not come. Not yet. The only way forward was to fight. Generals studied new tactics. Engineers designed even stranger machines. Drones that could split into smaller parts and confuse scanners. Weapons that looked weak but struck at the perfect angle. Small, fast ships that slipped into the blind spots of giant war vessels. Nothing humans built was perfect, but everything they built was clever. The third great battle began in a system filled with red suns and thick asteroid clouds. The coalition entered with confidence. They had maps, they had numbers, and they had arrogance. The humans were waiting. From the shadows of the asteroids, swarms of drones erupted like angry bees. Alien weapons fired back, but the drones were too many, too fast. They swirled around the ships, cutting into weak points. The larger human ships stayed hidden, waiting for the right moment. Then they struck. Small vessels dashed between giants, leaving trails of confusion. Some carried false signals that made one alien ship appear as five. Others released smoke-like clouds that blinded sensors. The battlefield became chaos. The aliens tried to form lines, but their ships collided in the fog of deception. 4 hours, the battle raged. Explosions lit up the dark skies, pieces of ships scattered like falling stars. Alien commanders shouted, desperate to restore order, but every time they thought they had trapped the humans escaped. Every time they believed victory was near, they fell into another ambush. At last, the coalition was broken. Dozens of ships were destroyed, many more forced to retreat. The humans stood battered but unbroken. Once again, the impossible had happened. Once again, the galaxy watched in silence. But victory came with heavy loss. Human ships burned. Soldiers were gone. Families waited for faces that would never return. Yet the spirit of humanity did not bend. If anything, the loss only made them stronger. They were not fighting for pride. They were fighting for survival, for their children, for their future among the stars. Rumors began to spread across the galaxy. Some said humans were not truly weak at all, but an ancient warrior race in disguise. Others whispered that they had made secret deals with darker powers. Fear turned to myth. The more the galaxy tried to explain human victories, the more they feared what they could not understand. And then something strange happened. Smaller species, long crushed under alien rule, began to rise. They looked at the humans and saw hope. If Earth could fight back, perhaps they could too. Rebellions lit across distant systems. For the first time in centuries, the great empires felt resistance from those they had ruled without mercy. It was all because of one small blue planet. The council gathered again, but this time the atmosphere was different. There was no laughter, no shouting, only fear. Some leaders spoke of ending the war before it spread further. But the strongest voices still demanded human destruction. They warned that if humanity survived, one day they would not just fight back, they would lead. On Earth, the generals also prepared for what was coming. They knew the galaxy would never forgive these defeats. The next battle would not be just another fight. It would be everything. The war had grown brutal. The galaxy had begun to fear. But the humans were not finished yet. Their enemies had seen their strength, their will, their fire. And soon, the galaxy would see something even greater. The final battle was approaching. The war had changed the galaxy forever. The name of Earth, once spoken with laughter, was now spoken with fear. Humans had done the impossible again and again. They had defeated fleets larger than anything they could build themselves. They had turned weakness into strength. They had made the proudest empires tremble. But the galaxy was not ready to give up. The Council of the Great Powers decided on one last strike. They called it the Final Coalition. Every empire, every ally, every soldier who could fight was brought together. Thousands of ships, endless weapons, and the most feared commanders of the stars. Their goal was simple: end humanity once and for all. The coalition fleet was so large that when it moved, stars disappeared behind it. It was the greatest force ever gathered in the history of the galaxy. No one had ever faced such power. And all of it was aimed at one small blue planet. On Earth, the people watched the skies. They knew the storm was coming. They knew this was the moment that would decide everything. If they won, humanity would earn its place among the stars. If they lost, Earth would be nothing more than dust. But the humans were ready. The generals revealed their final plan. It was not a weapon of mass destruction. It was not a giant cannon or a supership. It was something the galaxy could not understand: strategy. They had built thousands of small, hidden weapons across space. Mines disguised as rocks. Drones waiting in silence. Decoys placed in empty systems. And most dangerous of all, swarms controlled by human minds and machines working together. The battle began on the edge of Earth's system. The coalition entered with confidence. They had the numbers, the power, the experience. They believed victory was certain. But as soon as they crossed the first line of defense, the traps were sprung. Hidden mines exploded, ripping through the front ranks. Drone swarms appeared, overwhelming the largest ships. Decoys drew fire, making the coalition waste their strength on shadows. Human fleets struck from behind, vanishing before the enemy could respond. The battlefield became chaos. Alien commanders shouted in anger. They tried to form order, but every time they regrouped, a new trick broke them apart. Their giant ships were powerful, but too slow. Their weapons were deadly, but too predictable. Against them, the humans moved like smoke, like fire, like predators who never gave their prey a chance to rest. Hours passed. The greatest fleet the galaxy had ever built was breaking apart. Ships burned, commanders fell, and panic spread. For the first time in history, the galaxy realized that numbers alone did not guarantee victory. On Earth, people waited in silence as reports came. Each message carried both hope and loss. Human ships were falling too. Brave soldiers gave their lives to hold the line. Yet every sacrifice bought time. Every sacrifice weakened the enemy. Humanity did not break. At last, the coalition shattered. The largest ships, once symbols of power, drifted in ruins. Survivors fled into the dark. The humans had stood against the greatest force in the galaxy, and they had won. When the battle ended, the stars were filled with the wreckage of empires. Earth still stood. Humanity still breathed. The impossible had been done. The galaxy was silent. No one laughed. No one mocked. Even the proudest races bowed their heads. They had learned the hard truth: humans were not weak. Humans were not prey. Humans were the fighters who turned the tide of history. For humanity, victory was not just survival. It was a message. They had shown the universe that will, creativity, and courage could defeat any power. They had earned respect with blood and fire. The council met one last time. This time, there were no insults. No jokes. Only respect and fear. The galaxy regretted the day they had laughed at Earth's military. And on Earth, under the quiet sky, humanity looked at the stars. They knew the war was not the end. It was the beginning. The universe had tried to crush them, but instead it had opened the door. Now, the humans would step through, stronger than ever. The universe had laughed. But now, it would never laugh again.